Hello guys, how are you? I hope you're all well and I hope you had a lovely recess. You were able to rest and muster up new energy for the second part of the year. Well, I'm not sure if you know it. Well, I'll manage to send emails to you and let you know, but I'm going to go under surgery next week, so I will probably be absent for about 3 weeks or a month, I'm not sure yet. So I decided to accompany you with the lessons that you've been working on so far, and I mean the lesson routes that were assigned before the holidays, these two, with these short videos that somehow will try to replace the face-to-face lessons. I have added these two icons to these blocks. When it's time, I will allow you to have access to the component, the face-to-face component I'm recording right now. So this is a way to walk along with you these two blocks until we meet again in the real face-to-face lessons. I will also allow you to interact in the classroom threads below where this material has been posted. To be in touch, I think I will be able to walk around my house, so I will be able to turn on the computer and take a look at what's going on. Okay, it's by the way, it's nothing serious. I think it's going to be okay, but apparently the recovery is a bit longer than I thought it would be. So let's begin, shall we? For the first block, this video is about the first block. I mean, this one, beliefs about language and language learning. What are the key points? Well, I'm sure you noticed them. We talked about views of language, views of learning, and of course, views of teaching that go along with this view of learning. How these views correlate, the relationship between what we think about language and how we think we should teach it. That's the correlation between these two views. And how these views influence on the decisions of what we do in the classroom, how we teach, how we plan, etc. They are not always conscious, but they are often the reason why we tend to do things that, even when we are not aware of them. This icon will give you access to this present video I'm recording, okay? Well, let's go through the most important aspects of this first part. Talking about views of language and views of learning, you learned or you reviewed the idea that when we talk about a belief, we talk about something we think, the way we define a certain thing, the way we think about it. The beliefs we are discussing basically answer to the question, what is language and how is a language learned? It's a question we've been talking about since the beginning of the year, haven't we? So in this little game, you were supposed to sort out beliefs that refer to answer to the question, what is language, and beliefs that answer to the question, how do we teach, or how is language learned, okay? So here are, if you did it correctly, well, all the green ones are placed here, and all the orange ones are placed here, okay? So notice how they can be related, considering this is one of the activities you were expected to do and bring to class. So the challenge was first to identify and to be able to tell the difference between one and the other, and later on to see how they connect, how a belief of language usually goes hand in hand with a particular belief of learning. Okay, so you had the key for this activity. I hope you did it well, and if you have questions or doubts, you can always ask in the thread below this material. One example of a belief of language is this one. I'm going to read it out loud. Language can be described as a set of behaviors which are mastered through lots of drill and practice with the language patterns of native speakers. you're probably wondering why, I'm sorry about the siren, you're probably wondering why this statement is placed under the column or the block of beliefs of language. Well, to be honest, this statement includes both aspects. But since it begins with the idea of language can be described, we can say that mostly it reflects a view of language. But it also includes a view of teaching, as you probably noticed. The second part of the statement is basically about how to teach it. We can easily realize that this statement refers to a structural view of language. And the way to approach teaching from this structural view of language is the one described here, through drills with a focus on the structures, through repetition of patterns, with the aim of imitating, even reaching the level or the mastery of the language exemplified by a native speaker. So this could have been a controversial statement. You probably missed it or you placed it wrong. Don't worry, it's a tricky one. We have decided to leave it here under the belief of language block because it begins with the word language can be, while the others, the other ones placed here are clearly ways of or ideas, beliefs about how we should teach, hence how a language is learned. Okay, let's move on. I don't want this video to be too long. I want to give you time to think about it, and if you want to interact below in the thread, you're welcome to do it. You can ask questions, you can expand with ideas, what I've been talking about here. And if there's something I'm missing, I'm trying to concentrate on the most important issues of this block. But if you think I'm missing something that I should address, please let me know, okay? So, you have this brief comic strip with Mafalda as the main character, and some questions about it. It says which language view is exemplified here. I'm sure you identified it. This clearly represents a view, and when we talk about view of language, we are thinking about how this teacher defines, the teacher you can see here, right? How this teacher defines language, and hence how she teaches and what things she asks students to do. See how the two things are related. So this is a structural view, and the way, so if you think language is a structure and that students, in order to learn language, they need to know structures and vocabulary and only linguistic elements to put together and the rules to put them together, then this is what you do. You rehearse it, you say things, you repeat things, you learn things by heart. But we have a very, very clever student here, don't we? While she's saying, she's thinking, you see? Something that traditional approaches didn't always consider. So we have a very clever student thinking of what she's doing, what she's saying, and all of a sudden she's trying to put some meaning into what she's saying. And we know Mafalda is a very critical thinker, and she is very aware of society, and she's very aware of the problems in of her time. So what she's doing is putting some meaning to what she's saying. If she says, I trust, you trust, he trusts, we trust, they trust, she says, ingenious, aren't they? Meaning, how naive. Who can believe that everybody trusts in everybody? So, what we are seeing here is a student that needs to put meaning into what she's doing. This was the very, very obvious problem with the traditional approach, with the traditional view of language. It lacked the connection we all need when we learn, the connection with meaning, okay? Okay, so you have this activity you were expected to bring to class. The idea is that you try to match, to pair up a belief of language and a belief of teaching that that are correlated, as we talked about. You see, so I will invite you to do it as part of this interaction I'm trying to replicate via Classroom. I will ask you to do it in the thread below. You're not obliged to, of course, but if you don't participate, at least read your partner's participations and contributions, okay? And finally, you had a reading assignment with some guides to read the article, right? One thing I noticed while I was correcting your parciales, I'm going to let you know about the results soon. One thing I noticed was that you tend to perhaps skip, not to pay much attention to the guides. Sometimes the questions in the tests come from the orientations that I give you through these guides. So during this second part of the term, don't overlook them. They are very important because sometimes they tell you exactly what to look at when you're reading, in the text you're reading. And they also tell you how much to read. Sometimes I upload a whole chapter, but you don't have to read the whole chapter. You have to concentrate on specific pages of the subject. This is the case with this article, you see. Here it says you're requested to read from page 18 to page 29. So that means 10 pages, 11 pages. And here are some questions to keep in mind as you read. It's a good idea to read the recommendations before you move on to read the article, okay? So the recommendations here are the following. The article you're about to read was written in USA as an analysis of the learning situation of speakers of other languages. Bear this in mind as you read, okay? Because it will gain a particular perspective if you do that. The article will gain this perspective. Then pay attention to how language views and learning theories pair up. This is the key component of this block, okay? Focus your attention especially on the sociocultural view of learning. Why is this view important today? A question to discuss perhaps also in the thread, okay? There will be a section with a revision of concepts and theories discussed in Unit 1. It's good for you to revise them, to notice if you can add. I know you're reading something that you know already, but authors introduce concepts in different ways. You can always gain something from a different author. You can always gain a new dimension of understanding or subtleties about the concept. So it's a good idea to systematize all these new things that come up as you read about something that you allegedly know, okay? Okay, so read them through for recycling, check if there's anything new you still don't understand, or anything new to what you know. Number 5 says, you can skip the section under the title Effective Instructional Programs and Practices for K-12 English Learners because, as we know, this was written for a particular context we're not really involved in, right? 6, pay close attention to the section under a sociocultural constructive approach to teaching English as a second language. And systematize pedagogical implications. Notice that I'm all the time asking you to focus on this. This means establishing connections between theory and practice. So if I know this, how do I show it in practice? How does this impact on the decisions we make regarding teaching, planning, and delivering a lesson? Okay? Well, so let's go through the text quickly. I'm not going to read it, of course, because I'm counting on you reading it. We mentioned that you're supposed to read from page 18 to 29. So this is a section where you're revising theories here, theories of language learning, first language learning theories and second language teaching. So this means that what you will be revising is connected with the second chapter in Feya. The second chapter in Feya, unit number 1, was about second language acquisition, not first language acquisition, you see? So you have the names of the theories, sociocultural theory, cognitive and behaviorist here, a brief description or definition of the implications, the instructional implications, and then some relations, some background regarding key authors of the each of the theories. Okay, so notice that the sociocultural view of learning is close and very much related to the constructivist approach. We can say that the sociocultural view of language learning is a constructivist view for language teaching and learning. You have a summary of key points here, like again, guiding principles. You see, learning precedes development, language is the main vehicle of thought, mediation is a central concept of learning, social interaction is the basis of learning and development. Learning precedes development. This means that you are not obliged to wait for a child to be ready for learning. Learning can push development. It's not okay to say, no, I'm not going to teach this to a 4-year-old. Well, it depends on how you teach it, okay? Because you can teach almost anything to a 4-year-old. The problem is how you teach it in a way that makes meaning to a 4-year-old, resorting to context for a presentation that are meaningful to a 4-year-old. You won't be able to teach the concept you want to teach in the same depth you would teach to a 12-year-old, but there are always ways to deal with this, to teach. I was recently watching a video on a project kindergarten in Rosario is developing, and in this project kindergarten students are learning about the 3 R's for taking care of the environment. 3 R's, recycling, reusing, and I can't remember the third one, is usually a content we teach in primary school. Yet these children are learning it in kindergarten, you see, at a very, very early age. So according to Piaget, according to Vygotsky, there is nothing, mostly Vygotsky. I don't think Piaget would agree with this. Mostly Vygotsky would say that there's nothing a child cannot learn. It's a matter of knowing how to teach it. Well, language is the main vehicle or tool of thought. Without language, there is no thinking. Mediation is a central concept. Mediation is a concept that comes from Vygotsky's theory. We're not going to go into it because it's rather complex, and you probably saw it in a Spanish subject, psychology probably. We are not going to resort to it to discuss language acquisition here, okay? Social interaction is the basis of learning, and the zone of proximal development is the primary activity space in which learning takes place. These are things we have discussed in unit number 1. And then we have the relationship between language theories and second language learning. The theories about language. As you can see, there are more theories here than the one I presented here, adding the cognitive theory. Notice this, perhaps, please, because it is connected with authors we saw in the first unit. I reduced the key language theories to 3, which are the most common ones: the structural, the functional, and the interactional. But you have these 4 theories discussed in more depth here, and they are all the time connecting the theory with the way of teaching and also with the approach. So if there is something you don't understand, I'm sure this is all revision for you, but yet if there are key concepts you want to discuss, please participate in the thread. We can skip Cummings' conceptual interaction theory. We are not going to talk about it. This is not essential, right? We are already on page, I told you to skip, overlook this title, and on page 20, which takes all these pages, you see, and to read a little bit about a sociocultural constructivist approach to teaching English as a second language, which is 2 pages up to here. Okay? Fine. Well, this is all for today. As I said before, I don't want to make a very long video, and I hope this is useful for you, or at least a way to be with you while I cannot be at the school. Bye-bye.